The changeup has always been a strong pitch for me, but it has evolved over the years, and even to this day, I would say my changeup is better than it has ever been, despite not even playing anymore. In high school, in college, this was my grip for the most part, just a traditional two-seam circle change. It then started to evolve into more of like a one-seam circle change. So I was going across the tracks like this, and I was trying to feel it come off of my ring finger to create that side spin. So this was when I thought you had to pronate changeups. This was before I understood seam effects, understood the way that you can get depth on a pitch without actually pronating it. So as time went on, I started to get to this grip. So within the last year and a half, I was throwing the changeup with this grip like this, with the idea of getting the bare part of the ball on the inside of my hand. So right here, this part of the ball, slightly facing me and getting my tilt as low as I could with that dot or that bare part of the ball slightly facing me to create this type of spin. And that's what was allowing it to get a lot of depth. The struggle I had was getting consistently into the negatives. And the reason for that is I couldn't get my tilt down to 9 o'clock being left-handed without lowering my arm slot. So I was still getting the seam effects, having it release at a 10 o'clock tilt and getting it to get seam effects down to 9 o'clock to where I'd get zero vertical break a good amount, but I still wasn't able to get that really, really crazy negative depth without lowering my arm. And then after watching the tread video from Leaf not that long ago about the kick change, I started to experiment and tinker with it. And basically immediately I was able to get negative vertical break. It just wasn't completely consistent. And I was trying to figure out what the cue was for me of how I wanted it to feel off my hand and if I needed to change the grip at all. But what I basically landed on was my exact same changeup grip as before, but now I am just doing a baby spike with that middle finger. Very small. And I'm really trying to feel like it's just gently resting on the ball. So like if you look at it, like it's really not that big of a spike. I mean, it's very, very subtle. And the goal for me is basically to have a spike big enough so that my middle finger and my ring finger are the same size. And what ends up happening is it allows it to come off of those fingers closer to the same time, and it's naturally kicking my axis down to 9 o'clock and sometimes even down to 8:30, and then I'm still getting the seam effects of an hour or an hour and a half, which is why sometimes I'm able to get -10 and even, the best being -13 vertical break. And then my bad ones now are 0 versus before, those were my best ones. And now those are the ones when I'm not throwing it exactly how I want to, they're still at 0 or 1 inches of vertical break. So that's something that you can play with, is that spike. A lot of guys think that you still have to pronate this grip, but like this grip for me actually is like an amazing option for guys to help them supinate a little bit more, because now it allows you to get a little bit more weight on that ring finger and for it to come off of that ring finger, since that middle finger is now the same size or even slightly shorter than your ring finger. So something to play with. For me with this pitch, I like to have it loose in my hand. I don't like it to have it deep in my palm. I want it very loose on the fingertips. I like being on the bare part of the ball. Some people like being on the seams. It's just the issue I see with sometimes when guys get too far and they get on the seams, it comes off too cleanly and they're not getting the slightly lower spin efficiency that you kind of want for this pitch, and they end up just getting a little bit too much backspin and it doesn't really spin exactly the way you want to. So for me, just being on the bare part of the ball, slightly on the inside of those seams with these two fingers, allows that ball to slip out of my hand to those fingertips a little bit easier and get the action that I'm looking for. So give this grip a shot, tinker with it a little bit. You could even be all the way up here on the two seams and slightly spike that middle finger. Find what works for you. Something that I did notice is when I do too big of a spike, so like when I'm getting, into this type of range, it starts to really cut the ball for me. So my spin efficiency gets down to like in the 40s or 50s when I do that, which works to a degree where I'm getting the depth still, but I'm not getting any horizontal. And honestly, sometimes it's even actually cutting to where it's now getting into like a true 12-6 death ball type of curveball action, which isn't bad if that's what you're looking for. Just for me personally, the bigger the spike, the lower the efficiency and the more depth and less run that I get on the pitch. The sweet spot for me has been just that baby spike. And because of that spike, it has affected the circle on my index finger. So before when I throw this pitch, like I had a pretty big circle. I was all the way down here towards my thumb. Now for it to be comfortable, it's like a very small spike. Like a very small circle rather here on the side of the ball. And that just feels the most comfortable for me to have that spike and to feel it come out of my hand naturally when I am throwing this pitch. So give this a shot. And if you have any questions or ideas, or you happen to get video or data of this, please send it my way and I'd love to give you feedback.